Salutations, Songbirdians! It's finally time for MerMay. For those who don't know, MerMay is a month in which independent artists tend to make art all about mermaids over the course of the month of May. There's just one issue. I'm not an artist. Well, not one who draws. I do lots of different things on my channel, so if you're curious about that, what I'm gonna do next, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and the bell so you can receive all notifications for my weekly uploads. If you're already subscribed but want more things like behind the scenes footage, be sure to check out my new Patreon. Now the obligatory self-promotion is out of the way. Let's dive into the depths of Merfolk. Merfolk and Sunset Gaia are really very interesting. Mainly because they are an extremely varied race and or species. So much so, it's hard for me to pick where to start. I thought long and hard on where to start with this, so why don't we start with the beginning? The Adam and Eve story for Merfolk, if you will. The story begins with the Leviathan, also commonly known by humans in Sunset Gaia as the Kraken and Cthulhu. He himself is not a god, but an immortal demon. Now, demons themselves deserve a whole video on them, all of their own, so all you really need to know about them for the purposes of this video is that they are beings that pop out of the god's unfinished project pocket dimension that I am temporarily calling the Void until I figure out something better. The Leviathan is one who popped out of an entrance in the ocean, and he took it upon himself to guard it and provide guidance for other demons that come out of it as a means to protect the balance of the world. This works fairly well until humanity enters the picture. There are boats who get too close to the Void entrance, so he goes and attacks the boats as a mean of forcefully turning them around to get them to go away. If they don't, if they insist on keeping going in that specific direction instead of trying to go around him, he sinks the boat. This eventually results in humans worshiping him out of fear and sending him a sacrifice in the hopes that he doesn't turn and attack their homes on the shores. He winds up falling in love with one such sacrifice, and out pops Otaloa from their union, who, because of the demon's chaotic nature, is essentially a half-human shapeshifter. Her true form, in which I have right next to me here, is a perfect middle ground between human and her father's tentacular physique. However, because she is first of a kind and her mother did not survive childbirth, she was lonely. She learned the ways of the world from the environment she was raised in, as she learned to sing and dance from the creatures of the ocean and how to talk from the humans her father had to sink, and most importantly, how to hide from the humans. As she grew older, she drew Aphrodite, who is a creation goddess's attention. When the entrance to the Void moved from the ocean to somewhere the Leviathan could not reach, Aphrodite took her chance to approach the Leviathan and make him an offer. She offered to make Otaloa her protege and give Leviathan a job, protecting the palace of Poseidon from the humans who were growing bolder each passing year. As he had nothing to lose, he agreed on the condition that if Otaloa wanted to leave and go out on her own once she was an adult, that Aphrodite would let her go without so much as a curse or a fight. With that, Otaloa was taken on by Aphrodite as a protege and raised as though she were Aphrodite's own daughter. She learned the ways of humans and things about different races and societies becoming about, as well as educated as was possible for the time, even learning to change shape and use magic, which for her came through the songs that she learned from the sea. Once she grew old enough as a means to learn about the world firsthand, she was given the job to be Amphitrite's messenger. As a messenger, she had powerful enough backing to go anywhere she pleased and wherever she pleased, provided Amphitrite was okay with it, which she rarely impeded on. One day, Otaloa was sent to her mother's home village for a special mission: to commission an artisan. In the age of monsters and heroes, there was a smith who preferred to make finer and more delicate things. For now, let's call him Credo. Credo was a smith with a preference for making jewelry so beautiful he had gained Aphrodite's favor through what she commissioned from him alone. He had a hobby of scavenging shipwrecks that happened to wind up close enough to shore that he could scavenge from them. Because of this, Aphrodite wanted to test him to see if what Aphrodite said was true, with absolutely no other ulterior motives to speak of. No way. Once there, Otaloa went to deliver the message for the commission, and he piqued her curiosity. So she decided to stay a bit to learn more about the people who lived there. Over time, she grew more and more fond of Credo until eventually she worked up the courage to talk to him herself. Over time, they fell in love, and after being chased out by the village, they moved to live in the sea. Credo was even given the blessing of Aphrodite herself to live there. They had many children together and were pretty happy. However, over time they grew sick, and Aphrodite made them deities to save their lives, as she felt they should be allowed to observe the entire race they parented. And that's it. That's the story of the beginning of Merfolk. In terms of how they work, it's a bit complicated, as every time a mer marries a demon, the demon essentially overwrites the mer's ancestry and creates a new bloodline, and sometimes new species in terms of appearance. They can have the appearance of any species of marine life you could think of, except for plants. Only Gaia-born can be a plant mer. Their appearance can also vary from extremely human-like with gills and fins to closer to the marine life than humanoid. So earlier I mentioned magic, right? So next I'm gonna explain that, but before I do, there's something I forgot to put in my script for this. I decided to give a bloodline ability thing to the direct descendants of Otaloa. And that bloodline ability is specifically to cry tears of ink. I know, sounds horrific, right? It's so dramatic, and I love it. Tears of ink just makes sense for an octopi mermaid, though. I don't know, it just makes sense to me. So I decided to include that as a part of Merfolk biology, but specifically for the direct bloodline to Otaloa. The Merfolk themselves haven't made that connection yet, mainly because Otaloa just tends to hide. So they don't know what she looks like, but just know if I describe a character crying ink, that they are a direct descendant of Otaloa. Anyway, now for me to take the next logical step, which is for me to explain the magic specific to the mer. So here it is. Each race, even human, has its own magic. What that magic looks like and how it behaves depends on factors like the race you were born in and the culture surrounding it, as well as personality and ancestry. In the case of Merfolk, the central idea of their culture is is willfulness. This means that the magic manifests strongest in whichever way you can express your will. Most of the time, this expresses itself through song. However, this can manifest through purposeful action as well. The stronger your will and the stronger the magic, the stronger your will and resolve, the stronger the magic. However, this does not mean that those with the strongest magics are stubborn and unbending. This just means that they have the willpower to persevere and do what it takes to get the desired result, and remain flexible enough to do what needs to be done along the way. This means that indecisive people will have the weakest magic out of everyone. So if you have a hard time making choices, easy or hard, sorry, but no matter how pretty your singing voice is, you would barely be able to summon a bubble the size of my pinky nail. The strongest magic users are often people who could be described as willy-nilly. Someone who makes decisions easily and achieves what they want however they need to do it. To give an example, someone like Pinkie Pie from My Little Pony fits this bill perfectly. She is able to make decisions and choose the goals she wishes to achieve easily and quickly, and able to adjust her methods with extreme flexibility. This decisiveness paired with flexibility makes for the perfect Mer spellcaster, as all magic within the ocean operates on consent, as nature also has a will of its own. Whether you are able to overpower it to move it to your will or not depends entirely on the before mentioned factors. Now, there are specialized roles for Mer spellcasters depending on how it is used. If they wish to use it to defend their homes and such, then that role is sirens. These guys are basically soldiers that can use their voice to keep humans and others away from underwater settlements or even to go battle with other Mer. These guys are a primarily defensive position and rarely ever attack first. The second role is in Mer society is the songstress. This is a role developed specifically for diplomatic relations. The head songstress is the one who handles communications with the ocean's people and the land-dwelling races. Though the songstresses did disappear, and Merfolk did lose contact with land societies entirely during the Great Hiding. The songstress's main job is to inform the people's representative pod and entertain visiting diplomats and nobles. She is also the one to observe traditions and other ceremonies, as well as guarding sacred artifacts, one of which is in fact a magical bracelet made by Orloa's spouse. Otherwise, magic is completely supplementary to daily life among the Mer. And while there were some that do make enchanted items, they don't tend to last very long, and as such are very expensive, as the base often has to be imported from human civilizations, so most wind up being one-time use only. Some hard and fast rules of Mer magic, however, are you cannot cast a curse or any other spell directly on another person unless there's some sort of consent involved. Like they are sick and need healing magic, or are a dueling partner, things like that. While a spell can be cast on an object, the spell will not work unless the subject is willing to accept or trigger the spell themselves. The exception to this is spells that make the item self-destruct when someone that the owner doesn't want to touch them touches it. It is literally a spell designed to break the item the moment it leaves the enchanter's or designated person's care. By it leaving the individual's care, consent is implied. Next up for their culture, how about I go with their favorite sport before I get to the juicy stuff? The Mer sport of choice is obstacle course races, known as current finding, as they can be set up and taken down easily, as well as the constant changing of the currents can make life dangerous, It's no wonder they decided that the best sport would be basically more dangerous versions of sprints. A close second would be marine life rodeo. However, due to plastic pollution, those have gotten significantly harder to pull off. Onward to the juicy fruits! Just like in real life, every culture has dating habits that are more common in that place than others. Because life in the ocean is very tough, the majority of mer population is actually polyamorous. This does not mean that there are not monogamous couples. Monogamy is more popular inside older established cities than out in small, newer settlements. Note though, when I do write mer stories, I won't be writing poly relationships as the main focus of those stories, as I do not feel comfortable with writing that kind of story, and do not trust myself to handle it with the respect the story deserves. Good for you if polycules work for you, they just aren't a me thing. Monogamous couples outside of cities do tend to live alongside polycules as a means of protection, and this all works out fine because of the strong focus of consent that mer are raised with from the moment they are born. Which leads me to my next point for the society. Piercings are a form of punishment. This is because things like earrings that are bigger than a stud or any hole punched in fins and other places tend to mess with the wearer's ability to swim. If they want to wear an earring or have a nose ring, it is clip-on only. Piercing is usually a third-time offender's punishment in almost any crime. Tattoos, however, are a completely different story, as most mer are bioluminescent. There is not really any real need for tattoos. The ink from the tats tend to just mess with natural bioluminescence, and thus the only mer that really get tattoos are ones that don't have bioluminescence, which often means they have to wear something that glows to identify themselves in deeper waters. So tattoos are very, very rare. In terms of society, in terms of like how their society's based, like some societies, agriculture, this society, the Merfolk societal structure that tends to take place out in the ocean is artisan-based. So they don't often hunt for food and prefer to farm when they are able to protect the lands and breeding areas of fish from predators and poachers. But otherwise, if they are unable to establish a farm, they will ambush prey and scavenge for food and other supplies, even laying traps. Now, let's move on to government structure. If I were to simply summarize how it works, it's like democratic chieftains. Each settlement has their own elective representative from within the group who works until the day they stop serving the community, either through death or taking actions like trying to conquer other settlements. Because war has not, and never has served communities. Yeah. So, no. When a new chieftain is elected, the candidates are not the ones who sign up to campaign, but those who served the community and aided their own community and others during the reign of the last one. In other words, voting is done through nomination. Whoever gets the most nominations win. In my brain, this makes it impossible for active campaigning to happen, because again, these are actions taken during the end of the last one, which means immediately, like after the mourning process is done, actions during that mourning process just don't count. After that mourning process is done, they'll pretty much elect a new chieftain, and the cycle will continue all over again. When nomination is the voting is done, whoever essentially gets the most nominations wins. In the event of a tie, which happens very rarely, but it can happen, the local water dragon, if the settlement or pod has one, they will decide from the nominees. Now, because of the whole multi-leader thing, other chieftains will often come together when needed to nominate a specific pod to be the representatives for the race through a similar means. The pod is usually smaller or one that is not grounded within a specific settlement, as the ones who travel without making enemies more often than not tend to have a more diplomatic mindset and more of a focus on making allies rather than starting wars, which more often than not is what the Mer really need. Because of, again, how harsh the ocean is, with like predators and poachers. Poaching's a real problem out in the ocean, and overfishing. Like, there's a lot going on in the ocean. More research I did on marine life, I'm like, oh, okay, these people have to be harsh, because unfortunately society is actually a reflection of the environments they are founded in. That's just straight facts here. And these representatives, as I said earlier, serve until either death, no longer serving the community, like attacking other Mer, like starting wars with other Mer instead of focusing on protecting from like the actual active threats surrounding their community at time of recording anyway. Or they can just straight up quit, decide that they've had enough. Some pods have just enough of a strong diplomatic mindset to last multiple generations, like some chieftains can't have a strong enough mindset for their position to last, like within their bloodline, multiple generations before the corruption of power sets in. And these representatives, these are like representatives of the whole race, okay? They are known as the Silver Current. So in the event of a polycule, all their partners just tend to handle like different areas of diplomacy with like entertaining specific guests. They just handle different parts of politics, or even wind up handling specific pods and settlements, going and coming back. It's a whole thing. In the event where it's just a pair, though, the guy will just wind up getting messages from all the other chieftains about what's going on and decide how to decide aid and stuff. It's really cool. At least I think it is. The only like major government position that is not elected is the songstress that I brought up earlier, as she is chosen through audition, and she tends to choose her apprentices, those who would take her place. They audition for her, and she gets to pick from them. She can have however many she wants. She just has to pick like one specific to take over her major duty of diplomacy. And with the revival of the songstress after the end of the Age of Hiding, or the Great Hiding, I tend to switch between those two, a new role was created. I did not bring it up earlier because it was not a spellcasting role. This role is known as the Selkenfin. These are the scientist inventors for the race, essentially. These people, more often than not, are mixed race individuals, as the magic of mixed race tends to be the best of both worlds. A naiad is a mix between a Mer and another humanoid race, like dragon, elf, and dwarf. And a Selkie, which is one of the most common ones, in recent years anyway, which is a mix between Mer and human. And here is a warning for those a bit more weak of heart. In this next section, I will deep dive into the politics and laws of the Mer Kingdom. specifically regarding the justice system. And if you are sensitive to mentions of death and things like SA, skip ahead about, I should be done in about 5-ish minutes, or watch a different video, please. Earlier, I brought up that piercings are a punishment for Mer, as they tend to screw with the Mer's ability to move throughout the water. When it comes to justice, while innocent and guilty does actually take a part in it, it's very small and minor, as Mer tend to focus more on the effect of what the individual actually did. Two factors tend to take primary focus in determining punishment. 1. Level of violation on a spectrum, and how many times that particular violation took place, as they do escalate punishments. How level of violation is determined is like the autism and ADHD spectrum. It is a full-blown spectrum that is defined by how close to the most extreme and most minor the offenses are. The most minor offenses, otherwise known in human societies as the white collar things, is like littering. You know, small things that are just super easy to do on accident. These would most commonly be punished with varying degrees of community service. However, the most major offenses are, quick disclaimer before I move on. The community if they do actually wind up with community service as a punishment or part of that punishment, what they do during that community service will not count. And in modern days, most commonly, they wind up having to risk their lives going and taking care of the pollution that's out in the waters, like dismantling some of the trash islands. So there's that specifically. And onward to the most major offenses, which are known as violations of consent, like sexual assault and murder. Woo! Yay! These tend to have the most extreme punishments, with the first-time offense being forced therapy within prison or confinement. Repeat offenders start losing things, like, like fingers, fins, tongue, that sort of thing. Yeah, they start losing a lot of stuff. It's nasty. The loss of fins is viewed as an execution form, but actual executions have been known to take place. But losing fins with life in the ocean, unable to leave the ocean for land, and unable to reproduce, yeah, that's one of the things they can lose, is an actual fate worse than death, and more often than not wind up just straight up starving to death, because they are unable to gather food for themselves easily. They do have special rules for foreigners because, well, foreigners are not creatures of the sea. However, if you do commit some kind of crime, you will be stuck there in Mer territory until after the trial ends, in which you will be sent back to your local you will be sent back to where you're from, and your local government will be notified of your record and exactly what sentence you are supposed to serve, regardless of your own country's punishment laws. Modern tourism laws only prevent executions. So if you want to know more about the trial system, sorry, but you're out of luck. Right now, I have not decided on what they look like yet. Furthermore, so I have no clue. I have no idea right now how it looks when they're actually sentencing someone. So if the audience wants, they can weigh in on this in the comments. And as I have only decided on system of punishment, not trial system. And by the way, if you want to have more opportunities like this, be sure to join my Patreon. It's new. I've barely set it up, but I have a special tier called Puzzle Piece, where essentially I will send out specific polls where you get to specifically weigh in on like my content, stuff that happens in my books. Like you will be able to send me your thoughts, your ideas, and have the chance for me to actually, take them and use them if I decide I like them enough. Or, I love community, so I feel like letting my audience weigh in, send their thoughts and opinions on story stuff, not threats. No. But yeah. So if you want to weigh in on this stuff, join my Patreon. I should have the link in the description for it. So in terms of allies that Merfolk have, they don't really have all that many because of how isolated they were. So for a long time, their only alliance were with the water dragons as they share territory. Through the water dragons, they would be able to have access to benefits to having straight up only dragon allies across the board, which is nice. But for the most part, it's just the water dragons that they tend to live with. And in more recent years, with regaining of the songstress, there has been an ally with the fairies, made with the fairies in order to deal with the trash floating around in the ocean, specifically with one of the fairy kingdom. If you want, this is specifically because one of the fairy kingdoms, or the fairy kingdom, I have not decided if I want multiple fairy kingdoms or not. But in terms of that, they're like on an island that bops around a lot. So they wind up having so they're like surrounded by trash islands half the time. And wind up just stuck there. So yeah, so they have an alliance to try and help with the breaking down of the ocean's pollution. But yeah, alliances and stuff is very complicated. So now, okay. I have brought up the Great Hiding a few times without explaining it. So here is what the Great Hiding actually is. The Great Hiding is a period of time that was signaled by the fall of the Roman Empire, in which the dragon hunters that started in the Roman Empire forced all non-humans into hiding around 480 AD. For the Merfolk side of things, they cut off contact with human civilizations, only keeping contact with the Groctores, which, you want an explanation of that, that will have